My name is John Brink. I'm the founder, president, CEO of the Brink Group of Companies. I'm proud to be the presenting sponsor of Peter's Legge's Stories of Influence. My autobiography, Against All Odds, is now available on either Amazon or our website, johnabrink.com.
Now, if you've lived in Coquitlam for any period of time, certainly in the last number of years, you undoubtedly know of the person called Selina Robinson. I'm sure you have. Now, it's been a pleasure to have lived in that community for me and my wife for the last 45 years. I first heard about Selina when she was a family therapist. Then she served as a Coquitlam city councilor. Then she decided to run for MLA in the Coquitlam-Millardville, and she won her seat handily. She was appointed Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing, and she is now the Finance Minister for British Columbia. And her commitment to this province and what role she has taken has never been in dispute, because she always follows through. She goes beyond doing what she says she'll do and give a little more. For example, a couple of weeks ago, I gave her a copy of my new book. And then I gave her another book and I said to her, could you please give this to Premier John Hogan? She said, yes, I will do that. She took the book. I don't know, it was the next day. It could have been the next week. She gave John the book, but here's what she did that was different. She took a picture of her in a mask and John in a mask, and she took a picture of her giving the book to John. That's why she does things differently. To top things off, she always returns my calls and my emails, and she is my very, very special guest today. Please welcome Selina Robinson.
Hi, Peter.
Good to have you here. Thank you. Tell me, where do you think you have gotten your drive from for so long a time to do what you do in the public eye?
That's such a good question to lead off with. I think about my values and my sense of purpose and how I have come to understand the role that community plays and how important community is to all of us. I mean, we're social beings as human beings, and my life experience as a family therapist, my experience in working in community service agencies like Share Family and Community Service Agency that has served Coquitlam since 1972. And my life experience has just shown me that when you can build strong community, people thrive. And I can just give you an example. I'm a cancer survivor, was diagnosed with cancer in 2006. As a surprise, I wasn't sick at all. It was a surprise discovery of an intestinal cancer, rare. Tamara Taggart and I share that. We have the same unusual rare cancer. And I remember how shocking it was to me and my family. My children were at Charles Best Secondary. They're in high school, and it feels like a death sentence when you get a cancer diagnosis, especially this kind of cancer. And I remember distinctly friends coming together, neighbors coming together, and one neighbor in particular brought over tiramisu that she made. Mm-hmm. Now, when you have an intestinal cancer, eating is a challenge because they do all these things with your intestines, and it's really uncomfortable to eat. And I also lost a lot of weight. And I remember eating that tiramisu and feeling like it was the best thing I had ever tasted ever in my life. Yeah. And how healing that felt to eat. And I ate the entire tray. It was this big thing. And it's because of community that I really felt that I was healing. And so I believe that. And I believe in my decisions later to, work in the area of public policy, that is how I can contribute. That if every British Columbian was connected in community, they would thrive. And that's where my drive comes from.
So what do you think has motivated you to do this? Where has that come from?
Okay, well, I think it comes from a set of values. And you and I have talked about, I have a Jewish set of values. I was raised Jewish. And a very important principle in Jewish culture is a principle called tikkun olam, which means heal the world. And it's an obligation. And I don't come from a religious family by any means, very much culturally engaged, certainly, but this idea and principle and value of tikkun olam, of healing the world, can mean different things to different people. And to me, it means that we are here to make a difference. And for some, making a difference is being part of a stream keepers organization or shoveling a neighbor's walk. Those are all valuable, important ways of contributing. For me, I guess maybe I take it to that extra step, and that it's a really strong drive to just make it better for everybody. And for some, that means making sure that they have a roof over their heads. And others, it's really about affordability. Can I, afford to put my kids into hockey? And I want that for people. And so how can I, through public policy, help deliver that so that everyone can be all that they can be? And to me, that's what makes this such a fabulous place to live. And I also want to say, Peter, I think we have such good bones for that here in British Columbia, that we already have so much going for us around that. And so I want to take it to the next place.
I think all of us need a rabbi. I have a rabbi. I'm not Jewish, but I have a rabbi, Rabbi Pack. And we meet perhaps every 8-9 weeks at a little Jewish deli on Oak Street. And we talk about everything and anything. And I love his look on life and his perspective of how he does things. How would you respond to this? Starve your fear and feed your courage.
Oh, so it's sort of like do it anyway, sort of. I think anything new should come with fear. When John Horgan asked me to be his finance minister, I will confess, I took in a sharp breath around, oh my goodness, this is huge. It's particularly huge in the context of COVID because there is, sort of a new landscape for us going forward. And so, to say that I was anxious about it, for sure. At the same time, because I will take a challenge head on, because I, always want to learn new things, and because I believe so strongly in our capacity as British Columbians to get through really hard things, I felt that gave me, I would say, courage to say, okay, take it on, do it, make decisions on behalf of British Columbians so that they will benefit and that they will have opportunities, because that's the only way to move forward. So I like the saying, actually, I do.
For all the years I've known you, you've had to make a lot of decisions. Do you think do you take time to make decisions? And if you do, how long did it take you to make that decision to be Minister of Finance? Because that's a big deal.
So every decision I take for me is a very serious decision. Every single one. Every time I have to sign a document that says, approved decision. I also believe in reading everything. So, I have a professional public service. They do analyses. They make recommendations. I read this material that they put forward. I think that's absolutely critical. I have to trust their expertise. And so if I'm going to trust their expertise, I have to understand what they're doing and what they're saying. And if I don't understand, I don't sign. I say, I want a briefing. I don't understand how you got here, or I don't understand this analysis. And I appreciate that we want a decision sooner than later. So I will make the time to work late so that I can get the briefing, so that I can make the decision, because I have to live with that decision. And so I want to understand what I'm saying yes to and what I'm saying no to. So I think it's really important to trust the public service.
with such a huge portfolio, how much of your time is spent in Victoria?
So of course we're in COVID, so we're working from home as much as possible in order to protect everyone. So I am doing what I would call Victoria work every day, all day, and into the evening. I do most of it these days from my home office. I will go into my community office, probably trying to limit it to 1 day a week, because I want to also protect my staff who work there. So fewer bodies makes it safer for everybody, although I do occasionally have to go in, whether it's signing letters and that kind of stuff. As soon as session starts, it begins in March, I will be in Victoria all week long.
So do you have your own place in Victoria, or?
Yeah, I have a place in Victoria that's sort of, for the last 7 years, that's really, provided me with stability.
Yeah.
And what I like about it is it actually makes for fewer decisions. I don't have to decide where to stay. I don't have to decide where to eat. I have a place. And so it allows me to focus all my decision-making on the work.
The book I gave you, which you so kindly gave a copy to John, called Under the Influence. And so one thing I wanted to ask you is, who and what has influenced you the most over the years? And can you describe how that feels and how you responded to that?
That's another great question, Peter. People influence me, all people. For me, when I think about the thing that I miss most in COVID, that's been hardest, is I don't have as much access to people. And when I say that, it's, bumping into someone in a grocery store and then telling me what's going on in their life and, or what challenges they have. And then I can think about, oh, well, there's this program or there's that program. And I don't get to do that. What I do get from that interaction is I think, oh, well, that's an issue. That's really interesting. I wonder how we would address that. And then you might hear it again 2 months later from someone else, and then again. And to me, it's that engagement with other people that I think has the most tremendous influence for me, because I internalize those stories that I hear and I say, there's a pattern here. And I can just give you an example. In the 2017 election, the lead up to that, I was doing some door knocking. And I was hearing for the first time on the doorstep in many, many years, that childcare was being asked. People were saying that they needed childcare, or that childcare was an issue, or that it was really expensive. And there was one fellow in particular that stood out to me. And he was I'll say an older gentleman, and I'll just say somewhere up north of 55. I'm not saying that means you're old. It just means the likelihood that he himself needed childcare was not likely. He was on a ladder. He was trimming his hedge. And he was up on the ladder and I was down below and asking him questions. And he said, well, let me come down. And he comes down and he tells me about, this childcare thing. He's really wanting to see childcare be on the government agenda. And so I got very curious and I said, okay, so tell me the story of why is it so important to you? He's retired. And he said, he has 2 daughters. They are both professionals. One's a teacher, one's a nurse. They're both pregnant, expecting in the next little while. And they can't find childcare, and they're trying to figure out how they keep working so that they could have a kind of lifestyle that is important to them, and raise a family. And it dawned on this gentleman that what his children needed was childcare, because he didn't really want to be the kind of grandparent that felt obligated to babysit 5 days a week, that was going to be too much for him, and that it was important to him. And that, like, to this day, it's stayed with me, because it reminds me of what people need. And hearing those stories are what I would say influenced me.
Is there 1 or 2 people that you can name, or is there 1 or 2 people you could talk about without naming them that has had the most impact and influence in your life?
So there are different parts of my life, of course. So I'm just going to talk about a boss, because I think she taught me so much about leadership. And her name's Joanne Granick. She's retired now. She was the CEO of Share Family and Community Services for a long time. And she hired me to be Share's fundraiser. But I had worked with her before then when I was a family therapist, and she was the supervisor. And so I've had a long-standing relationship with her from I guess the probably early 90s. When I think back, it feels like such a long time ago. And she taught me the importance of relationship with staff. She taught me the importance of acknowledging good work. She taught me the importance of clarity of role. And I can remember conversations where she would come to her team and say, I'm here to consult with you. I want to hear what it is you have to say based on your experience around this particular decision. But I want to be clear that I'm going to be making the decision and that I'm going to live with the consequence. Mm. So tell me what you know about this particular issue, because it's important that I hear from you as the user group. And I remember hearing that and thinking how grateful I was to know what she expected of me. So I knew what my role was in this conversation, and it was to give her feedback, but I wasn't going to she was going to make the decision. I didn't have to do that. And so she's had tremendous influence on me, or just around leadership. And so I talk about having sort of her internalized voice in some way around sort of what questions would she ask in this situation. And that helps me in my current role.
So tell me, how do you influence people? What skills do you have that must be significant? Otherwise, you wouldn't be in the position you are. What do you do, and how can you comment on how you influence people to do exactly what is necessary to be done?
I think, you keep asking me such good questions, Peter. I think having mutual respect is really critical to get the best out of people. And so the way I influence is, I do think, is by acknowledging good work. So when my colleagues, I see them make good decisions, or I see them grapple with a problem and come up with a solution, I acknowledge that this must be so hard for them, and they did a really good job of presenting it and looking at all the various components, and that while it might have been hard to get through a decision, I think they made the right one, or just some sort of notes of encouragement. I think people appreciate that. We're just so quick to judge when we perceive people not doing the right thing, that we jump all over each other. It worries me that we see that so much. So I really make a point of, trying to acknowledge when people make the right decision, but also I think listening. I think that's the other thing that I do really well, is I take the time to listen. I ask questions. I don't jump to conclusions most of the time. Sometimes you do, it's really hard, but I really try to stay present and focused, and listening as well. And I think people appreciate that. And that helps when they come to me around, I've got this problem. It tells me that they trust me, and they know that I'm going to listen and that I will give them advice.
When you gave the book to John, book for yourself, book for John, and you had masks on, it looked like you might have been in the Victoria Airport. I don't know where you were. That's not really. And then you took a picture and sent it to me. That has influenced me. That has reminded me to just go a little extra step, do a little more than is expected of you. And if you do that enough times in a week, in a month, in a year, you're going to influence a lot of people to support what you're doing. Does that occur to you that would happen? Or is it just a natural thing for you to do?
Well, I don't know. My mother always said, make sure you write your thank you notes and don't wait too long. And so again, these are the internalized lessons that we've learned, and we've incorporated them into our practice. So I do thank you notes. But when you say it that way, I think, when I text a colleague around some great work, or staff person, and thanking them for a great presentation, you're right, it does influence, but at the same time, you cannot not influence, right? So being engaged in some way already sets the stage for influencing, right? So the opposite of influencing is ignoring, I would suggest. So today is Pink Shirt Day, and I posted a picture of me, and I asked people. The theme of Pink Shirt Day this year is lift others up. That's the theme. And I thought, okay, well, what do I do to lift others up? Well, I try to go on a daily walk in Mundy Park here in Coquitlam. And when I pass by people, I say good morning, or I say hi, or great day for a walk. I try to acknowledge the people that I pass by letting them know that I see you. It doesn't take a lot of effort.
Yeah.
But it does influence people. It does say, oh, that person just said hello. And people feel obligated, of course, to say hello back.
Yeah.
And so as soon as you engage with someone, you've already started to influence.
As we close, is there one thing you'd like to say to this audience of about 20,000, mostly in BC, if not all in BC? Is there one thing you'd like to share about your life that we wouldn't know, that would be touched by what you accomplished, what you've done, and what your vision is for yourself and the government?
I think when I think about what I started off with earlier around Tikkun Olam and healing the world, and about obligations, right? So it's not just that you should or you could heal the world. It's you have an obligation to heal the world. And I think we don't often pay attention to our obligations. And like, what does that even?
And the commitments we've made to those obligations?
Yeah. So what obligations do we have, and how do we live up to them? So when you go back to your book, and the fact that I gave it to John, I told you I would give it to John.
Yeah.
Right. I obliged myself to do that. It's on the list. I have to give this book to John. And I said, because I said I would.
Yeah.
And so I took on that obligation, but it wasn't fulfilled until you knew that I lived up to that, because I could have given it to him, and you would never know that until we bumped into each other or we had an opportunity. And I could say, oh, remember when you gave me that book? I gave it to John. I just felt like it wasn't finished. The act of giving John the book wasn't finished. And so, we make obligations all the time. And I think it's important. It's our word, or our commitments to ourselves, right? I'm going to get out for a walk every day. That's an obligation to me. And so I think we should take them seriously. Now, you can always change your obligations. I'm not saying that you can't, but I think when you give your word to do something, you're obliged to. And I take that very seriously. I
think you do. Selina, I thoroughly enjoyed this. I wish we had an hour to chat with you about this, but I promised you 15 minutes and we've gone a little over that. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Is there one thing left in your life, in closing, that you would love to do that you haven't done yet?
Well, I'd love to be a grandmother, but that has nothing to do with me making that happen. You know what? I always have a list. Peter, I always have a list. When I turned 50, that was 7 years ago. I don't mind people knowing that. I made a list of 60 things to do before I'm 60. And there's still lots of things I haven't got to. This job continues to take up a lot of time, and I'm fine with that. But I suspect that list, which for me is an obligation list, it will carry on for the next number of decades. And so there's lots still for me to do. There's lots and lots. I have a long list, and that's the stuff that keeps me juiced up and excited about every day. Well, thank you for what you've done for our municipality in Coquitlam. And thank you what you are now doing and have done for years for the province of British Columbia, the best province in Canada, a province that you and I love passionately and dearly. God bless you. Love you lots, Selina. Thank you. Thank you so much, Peter. There are very few people in Canada who are not hockey fans. Now, sometimes, in fact, many times, we might get frustrated with the Vancouver Canucks performance. But I think in our hearts, we're all fans of ice hockey in this great country of Canada. My guest today was born in New Westminster, which is my hometown, and he is a former Canadian professional hockey player. And for 15 seasons, he played for the Vancouver Canucks.
the Montreal Canadiens, and the Washington Capitals. He's been a color commentator for the Vancouver Canucks broadcast. And since retiring as a professional hockey player, he has become one of North America's foremost motivational speakers, relating his experience in hockey to business and success in general. Please welcome my guest, Ron Walter. Ron, welcome.
Thank you, Peter. Great to be with you.
I didn't know you were going to have behind you a picture of the several Montreal Canadian jerseys. Tell us who number 2 and number 5 is and number 4 and what they mean to you.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you, Peter. I borrowed this with a little picture from the Hockey Hall of Fame. And if your guests or your participants today have ever experienced the Hall of Fame, what they did is they actually replicated the Montreal Forum dressing room. Now, this was a few years back. This is before me. But this exact same dressing room, the way it's set up, the way the seats are, was the same room that we dressed in. Now, some of these sweaters and the equipment, it's from an older era. So number 2 would have been Doug Harvey. You know, so many, if you're a younger person and you don't know who Doug Harvey is, please Google him. A brilliant, brilliant player. And then number 4 over there would have been Jean Beliveau. So, you know, you've got some of the greats that are represented at that age. And the amazing thing, Peter, is that all of those plaques on the wall were there when we played. So it's a replica of the dressing room, which is very cool. And I wish you could see just above the plaques, because above the plaques were all of the faces of every Montreal Canadian who was in the Hall of Fame, and which was quite a few. I should know the number. But you know what I used to laugh at? I'd be dressing in the room and I'd look up and there was all these eyes staring at you. Right? Like, and it was haunting. They were almost saying, "You better win tonight."
Now, who did those eyes represent, do you think?
Well, there was a number of older players that I had to learn about. You know, it was the Howie Morenzes, and you know, it was certainly the eyes that I remember were Rocket Richard. You know, he had those burning eyes, and they looked a little angry, and it was almost like, "Come on, Ryan, you're not playing very well tonight."
I have a picture of Guy Lafleur, a signed picture by him playing on the ice.
Yes.
I don't know where I got it, but I'm sure it's worth a lot of money today. And so, what was the number one experience for you playing for those 9 years with the Canadiens?
Well, you know, I think, Peter, I learned so much. So I came, think about the contrast. I came from the Washington Capitals, who were an expansion franchise and struggling to win. And we had never been in the playoffs, to trade it into, you know, not only an established franchise, but one that won consistently. And before I got to the Montreal Canadiens, over the past 10 seasons, they had won 6 Stanley Cups.
Wow.
So they understood the process of winning. And one thing that I learned, Peter, was it's one thing to learn how to play in, and I learned that in Washington. I had 38 goals in my 4th season. I had 18 on the power play. But it's another thing to learn how to win in the NHL. So most people say, "Well, you're in the NHL, you're making lots of money. That's what." Well, no, you're not there to make the money. You're there to win. And what I learned, Peter, is there's a couple of key components around the differences between playing and winning. And you know, the guy you talked about, Guy Lafleur, he taught me most. Guy, have you ever been taught by somebody that doesn't teach you anything? In other words, he didn't say anything. He didn't sit me down and say, "Ryan, here's the top 5 things you need to do to be a winner." He showed me. And I was fortunate, Peter, to be Guy's roommate for a little while. And Guy Lafleur, I don't know if people know this, all of us would get to the rink 2 or 3 hours before the game to prepare. Guy Lafleur would be there at 2:30 in the afternoon for a 7 o'clock game.
Wow.
He would have all of his equipment on and his skates on, but he wouldn't have them tightened up. That was his way to prepare. I learned how to be a pro from Guy Lafleur. The other thing I learned from Guy is that you have to turn your have-tos into want-tos. Right? If I have to go to practice every day, this is going to be a long life. But if I can't wait to get there, and Guy showed me that. He didn't tell me that. I just watched him. You know, Guy Lafleur was on the ice 40 to 35 minutes to 40 minutes before any other player for every practice.
Wow.
And you know what was cool, Peter? He didn't have to be there. He was one of the top 10 players in the NHL. And then finally, Guy taught me about respect, and that you don't put down fans, you respect fans. I'll tell you how he showed me. Guy Lafleur, can you imagine how many hockey cards he signed as a player? Like everybody from Quebec, everybody from Canada, from all over the world would send him a hockey card and say, Mr. Lafleur, could you please sign my hockey card? And you know what I watched? I watched Guy after practice, Peter, big smile on his face, sit down in his stall in this dressing room, and with a big, it was almost like it wasn't a bucket. It was like a bag full of mail. And he would personally sign every autograph.
Wow.
He didn't have a secretary sign his autograph. He would do that. He'd lick the envelope. He'd put it in the mail slot. And so I learned from guys like Larry Robinson and Bob Geeney and Guy Lafleur. So it wasn't as much how you played on the ice, although there were some things there. It was more about who we became. And that influenced the playing versus winning.
That probably helped you. I mean, your skills can only take you so far, but then your mental approach to the game, which is what you're talking about, your mental approach to life and playing for the Montreal Canadiens. What one single thing made the Montreal Canadiens such an icon in the hockey world, not just in Canada, but in the hockey world?
If I could only pick, I'll give you two and then I'll pick one. I think the first is history. It's always awesome when you can be on a team that has a winning history. And when I was there, Peter, we were so fortunate. Jean Beliveau would come and he would connect with the guys after practice. In those days, Doug Harvey was around and Maurice Richard was around. So we got a chance, when we went to Yvon Cornway's bar after a practice as a team to get together, they would have all of these amazing players that come sit down. Hey, Ryan, how are you doing? So I think that the capacity of the history passed on some things. But if I could only pick one thing, Peter, I would give the fans, the Montreal Canadiens fans, a lot of credit, because I would say that the one thing that differentiates is expectation.
The fans' expectations.
The fans' expectation, the management's expectation, and the players' expectation.
Yeah.
When we lost the Stanley Cup in 1989 to the Calgary Flames, and most organizations would hold a parade for getting to a cup final, but not the Montreal Canadiens. It was the city was in mourning. You don't lose.
Wow. Well, let's go back to your beginnings here in this province in New Westminster. You were born in New Westminster. Was it the Royal Columbian Hospital or?
Yeah, the Royal Columbian.
Do you remember the doctor or anything? I mean, obviously it's, do you ever go back and visit them?
So great question. So I spent a bit of time in the Royal Columbian over the years. As a kid, I was chasing a marble down a hall that had hardwood floors, and I was in my socks and I slipped hard into the very locked bathroom door. So I spent a little bit of time with a concussion in the Royal Columbian Hospital, but I don't know the people as well there. I've spent lots of time in hospitals over the years, and I do know some of, I blew a knee, my right knee, as a 16-year-old in Kamloops. You know, the two doctors there, Dr. Smiley and Dr. Polson, they both did a brilliant job on putting my knee back together. And, you know, I'm always so thankful to have played 1,000+ games in the NHL, and I give them a lot of the credit.
Mm-hmm. So when you become a professional hockey player, do you think it will go on longer than it does? But obviously, as you get older, some of the skills just naturally disappear because of age. Not that you still don't have the skills, but
Yes.
how do you begin, and when do you know it's time to hang them up?
Oh, that's such a good question. You know, I was 15 seasons, my second season with the Vancouver Canucks, and I only played 22 of 82 games that year, and I wasn't injured. So that tells you a lot, right? Like my legs are starting to go. I'm not fast enough. And you know what's funny about that is I went to Pat Quinn, who I love, and Pat passed way too early. He was a wonderful man, wonderful coach. And I said, "So Pat, another season?" And he looked at me, he said, "No, Ryan, not with this team." And you know what I'm trying to say there, Peter, is once you're a player, you never want to stop playing.
Yeah.
And so I think I had to be forced out of the game because I loved it so much. And then, you know, I think what you and I have done in our lifetime is, and I have such affinity with you, Peter, because I think we're both curious, and I think we love principles. So I began to look back at the principles that worked in professional sport and tried to really, you know, help people in what I call professional life and professional business. And so that was sort of starting of the transference of those principles
To the career that you're now in.
Correct.
So when did you realize you could be the speaker you are and have the wisdom that you do to impart to audiences literally all over North America on a regular basis? When did that aha moment come for you?
Well, it was gradual. I didn't have an aha moment. But what happened to me is because it was a gradual movement, as a captain at the NHL level and an assistant captain, what would happen is teams would often say, "Okay, you're the captain, so you go and speak to the gathering that we've got for this charity," or, you go speak to the the season ticket holder party, or. And so what happened to me, Peter, is I got a little bit comfortable with being in front of people. And I sort of, I botched it, many times, and I wasn't prepared other times. But I got to a place where, I could stand up in front of people and hold their attention and have some fun and enjoy it. And I think that enjoyment allowed me then to go, okay, I'd love to do some, how do I add value to people? How do we help charities? How do we do different things, and then that gradually moved into, taking a master's degree in leadership business at Trinity Western University that really launched, I had a lot of ideas around leadership, but it was good to go back and sort of, spend time really understanding the foundation of leadership and high performance so that, I could have maybe a better, foundation of what I should, talk about. I think the other thing, Peter, that you do brilliantly is something that I've learned from you and that I started to capture early in my hockey career. And that is, I am one of the few, I'm a weird duck. I was journaling as an NHL player.
Wow.
So I would write down all those stories, and I don't know why I did it, Peter, but I would, if I hadn't have written down those stories, I wouldn't have remembered any of those stories. And so I've been, like you, I believe in the power of stories connected to principles that work, whether you're, a single mom or you're a CEO of a company. And I think that's what's really allowed me, to get up in front of people, number one, be comfortable, But then the word that is always in my mind when I take the stage, it's not about Ryan, it's about value.
Mm.
How can you and I, Peter, add value to people? And sometimes that's the keynote, sometimes it's training, sometimes it's a one-on-one coaching an executive.
Would you say that the majority of your speeches, though, are about leadership and the qualities of leadership, and what most business people need desperately is to understand what leadership is? Because if they don't practice it, if they don't have to just talk about it, they have to actually do it. They have to be that leader.
Yes. So the answer is yes. I think most of what we do is centered around leadership development. Thing I love about leaders, and John Maxwell said this, that leaders are learners. And so you and I love having, a room full of people that want to get to the next level. They want to take themselves to the next level. So that would be the first piece. But I think secondly for me is that there's so many parts of leadership, right? Like, and one of the big areas that we've been fixated on and sharing these days, especially during COVID, is around the 6 mindsets of leadership, and how these mindsets, will actually, decide the type of leadership style and performance that we have, and then that sort of is the indication of the culture, that each of the organizations have. So we're really fixated on mindset only because that's the foundation of leadership.
Yeah. And you would say the majority of your presentations and speeches are based on these 6 principles?
A big chunk of them right now, and it's not, if people want to talk about, leadership and credibility, or leadership and communication, I mean, we do all of those. But I think right now, most people are fixated on resilience. How do we stay resilient as a leader? How do we help our people stay resilient? How do we help our families stay resilient? And so we're doing a lot of work with these 6 mindsets around resiliency. So how do we develop resiliency? And you'd like this, Peter. We've just developed another little model we call the 3 R's. And this is a good hockey illustration that plays out into a cognition illustration. The first R, anytime we're in negativity and we catch ourselves, so we're aware, we recommend that we do the first R, which is we recover our thinking. And we recommend that we use a trigger. So my favorite trigger right now when I catch myself being negative is go to neutral. And we call the neutral zone a place where we are either mindful or we're in the flow zone. Go to neutral. So we recover our thinking. You know what's cool about that in hockey? When you don't have the puck, what do? You recover the puck. Number 2 is we regroup our thinking. And that's the brainstorm. That's the quick, where are we? Where are we going to go? What's our next action? How do we take next steps? And in the world of hockey, when you recover the puck, if you're in the neutral zone or the defensive zone, you regroup the puck. You have a process to regroup it. So you might pass defenseman to defenseman, you might pass D to winger, or you might skate with the puck. But you have a plan. You fixate, you look up ice, and you make a decision on the plan that you're going to utilize. The number 3 R is then we reattack. And I love that idea. So we regroup our thinking, recover our thinking, regroup our thinking, and we take next action. We reattack. And for me, Peter, that has been the essence of what I call the inner resource of resilience. Viktor Frankl talks about a space, right? That space that we have in our brain, like between, the idea of you're stimulated and then you're going to take next action. There's a space. And I think that space is where we grow our resilience. If all we do in life is react, then, we're at the throes of life. Yeah. But if we can not react, if we can respond correctly, if we can make the space wider so that we take the action we desire, instead of the action that we've sort of reacted towards, we've got a chance to stay resilient.
One last question. Do you take unsigned your hockey player card to your presentations, and do you sign them for your guests?
Great question. You know, I've learned from you about this, Peter. I don't take hockey cards very much anymore. I'm an old guy. Nobody remembers me. But you know what I do love signing is our books. And I think like you, you know, our latest book's called Hungry. Our next book will be called Breakout. But like you, I love to give away books because I think it's a way, instead of looking at a hockey card, which is me, it's a way to add value to people's lives. And now, you know, what's on the table is I give away a lot of books, and so do you, Peter. And you know what we know about that? A lot of people will never read those books.
Yeah.
But you know the good news? They have a choice. And the people that move on in life will read the book, and they'll get something from it, and then they'll go and they'll devour another book. You are my hero, Peter, because for many reasons. But I'm trying to always catch up to you. I only read 44 books last year, so I'm behind you. But my goal is to get to your goal of a book a week.
Yeah.
And I'm a little bit behind in 2021, so I'm hoping to catch up.
Well, you have done a wonderful job this morning, and thank you so much for being on this broadcast. We appreciate it. We've run out of time, really, unfortunately, not your fault, my fault. We should have scheduled more time. But I wish you all the best in your career and what you're now doing, and the impact you're having on a different team, business teams, which might be a little longer than playing hockey for the Montreal Canadiens or the Vancouver Canucks. God bless you, Ryan. Thank you so much. Much appreciated.
Thank you, Peter. Hi to Kay for us.
Yeah, I will.
Welcome to High Point University. On this campus, we are focused on preparing students for the world as it is going to be.
Hi, I'm Steve Wozniak, the Woz, and I'm proud to be High Point University's Innovator in Residence.
I'm Cent Marshall, CEO of the Dallas Mavericks, and I am proud to be High Point University's Sports Executive in Residence.
I'm Mark Randolph, and I'm proud to be the Entrepreneur in Residence at the premier life skills university, High Point University.
20 years ago on a Sunday afternoon, I received a phone call from Brian Tracy, and he was inviting me to join the most prestigious member-only professional speaker association in North America, made up of the top 20 speakers in North America. At the time, I was the only Canadian speaker who'd been invited to join Speakers Roundtable. Now, I must say I felt a little over my head, but I didn't hesitate. What a privilege it was to be asked to join. One of the members was Nido Qubein, possibly the finest speaker in North America, and boy, did I learn plenty from him. Our friendship grew, and I certainly was not disappointed in the learning curve that I was experiencing, and Nido and I became good friends. About 16 years ago, he was invited to take on the presidency of High Point University in High Point, North Carolina. At the time, a humble little university, that the university board of directors felt they needed Nido Quebein's wisdom, drive, energy to transform the university into a magnificent campus that has defied the expectation of even the most skeptical people. It is a spectacular transition that you really need to see to appreciate. Nido Qubein mounted his creativity, his contacts, and imagination in transforming the university into a worldwide success. He says your beliefs lead to behaviors, and your behaviors lead to better results. Please welcome my guest, the extraordinary Nido Qubein.
Thank you, Dr. Legge. What a pleasure for me to be with you. And with an introduction like that, I'd like to be interviewed by you every day of the week.
I found yesterday that the university kind of subscribes to the Luke 12, verse 48 verse that says, to whom much is given, much is required. And I think that maybe started with you because too much has been given, the talent that you have been given, the abilities you have been given, much is required as you have developed the university.
Well, that's correct. It's actually in our entryway to our Fine Arts Center here. It says, too much is given, much is required. That's the story of High Point University, right? So we've raised $500 million here in gifts without really even printing a brochure, but we've asked people to invest in this mission and in this work. And it's been a remarkable transformation, Peter, of an institution that was lost in an ocean of sameness and that has graduated into a small pool of distinction. Our numbers show it, our brand shows it, our parental approval and their advocacy show it. We've been blessed and highly favored.
So when you joined the university some 16 years ago, give us an idea of how large it was in terms of numbers of students versus where you are today, 16 years later.
All right, so Peter, you know, you've known me a long time. You know that I have been in publishing and advertising and real estate. I started a bank back in the mid 80s. I've been in retail. I've been in a lot of different businesses. And people say, how can you do all this kind of stuff? And when I was consulting and coaching, I was consulting and coaching with some of America's, actually North America, some Canadians, best companies. And people say, well, what do you know about this and this and this and this? And I would go, well, I don't necessarily, I know that particular business. What I do know, though, is that I have an understanding of the fundamentals. Knowledge does not equal understanding. So you could be a straight A student and not be capable of doing anything of measure. So it's understanding, it's comprehension that takes us places. And I always understood the fundamentals that make a company great, that makes a team great, that makes a project great. And so when I came to High Point University, I found a school with 91 acres landlocked. You couldn't grow, residential area. Everybody told me there's no way you can grow. Well, today we have more than 500 acres. We invested about $250 million in purchasing just property. The school had 1,400 students in total. Today we have 5,600. Our revenues were 28 million. Today our revenues are 350. In US and News World Report, that's the most important ranking for colleges and universities in the United States. We were number 17 with a score of 63 out of 100. Today we are number 1, 10 years running, score of 100 out of 100. We had 3 academic schools. Today we have 9. We used to offer only BA and BS degrees. Today we offer doctoral degrees. We had 100 faculty members. Today we have 350. I think you get the idea. Yeah. We not only grew, we exploded. And there are reasons why we did that. And they're the same reasons any business uses to be successful, to be sustainable, and to provide appreciated value. And that's the key. Not just provide value, but provide appreciated value. Appreciated value means the person for whom you render the service must acknowledge, realize, and appreciate what you are providing for them. That's a skill. I used to teach it to a lot of my clients that a lot of companies miss. They think, oh, well, our service, our product are valuable. Well, great. It better be valuable. You should be out of business. But do the people to whom you attempt to provide this value, do they fully appreciate you so much that they're willing to pay whatever price you charge them as long as it's fair, and that they will go out of their way to advocate your business? And that's what I think I brought to High Point University, a comprehension of business. And then I was able to create a team comprehensively with intentional congruence that bought into the strategy and that has been performing at an exemplary level, and that has been providing an extraordinary education to every student at High Point in an inspiring environment, and certainly with caring people.
So you have an accent. I haven't alluded to that, but tell us where you were born and how you actually came to the United States and where you live now.
Well, I live now in North Carolina, and I came from the Middle East. My mother was Lebanese, my father Jordanian. I came here at age 17 to go to college. I had $50 in my right pocket. I could hardly speak the English language. And my daddy died when I was 6, Peter. I think you remember that. And my mother brought us up. My mother had 4th grade education. However, my mother learned a new trade and she became a seamstress and she made money to feed us and clothe us. 5 of us, 3 boys, 2 girls. I never heard my mother say to me, we can't afford that. I always heard my mother say to me, we'll figure out a way. So I grew up believing in the art of the possible. I have a can-do attitude. So at Hype University, I wasn't trying to be a president of the school, Peter. You know, my career was thriving. I was going to be the chairman of the board here. And the school wasn't doing well, and they begged me to come and take over. I thought I'll do it for 2 years, honestly. I fell in love. And I also found out that this is where God wants me to be, because the doors of opportunity start opening up and we start succeeding in all kinds of ways. And so here I am 16 years later, and you wouldn't believe this institution. It is not what you remember at all. We have grown by leaps and bounds, buildings to die for. Our website doesn't really do it justice. Our videos don't do it justice. But obviously we're doing something, if not unique, Peter, we're doing it in a unique way. We are the premier life skills university. First, we say we're a God Family Country School. And then we say we're the premier life skills university. So we educate you inside the classroom to become a master of your discipline. And then we frame that Mona Lisa with what you must know so you can excel in life, whatever your pursuit is in life. And you know what? It's working. It's working in measurable and meaningful ways. And I'm, for one, very, very grateful that I could serve in this way.
Tell me, well, what has given you the drive and the passion and the energy to make this shift from a professional businessman, certainly one of the top speakers perhaps in the world, to being president of High Point University?
Well, gosh, Peter, I wish I knew all that. I wish I knew the secret to every bit of success. The reality of it is, I always had a desire to do good. And I knew that to do good, you must be good. Being must come ahead of doing. And I also knew that your beliefs lead to your behaviors, and your behaviors lead to your results. And I always believed that I was created to do something worthwhile in life. And so whenever the command came calling for something worthwhile, I always stepped up, whether it's giving philanthropic money or giving my energy or my time or serving in some responsible way, just like you have done all your life. And in business, I came out of graduate school and I started my first business. I had $500. I published a newsletter called Adventures with Youth. It went all over the world. Within 2 years, I had 68,000 customers in 32 countries. People started asking me to come speak. One thing led to another. I woke up one day and I was doing 200 speeches a year. And I realized I wasn't doing enough for my clients. And so I began to talk about the ongoing relationships, as in consulting and coaching. And I find that the world responded to me. And so all of a sudden, at any given time, I had 8 to 10 major corporations that wanted me to be their consultant. The entryway was always via the CEO office. In other words, I had to have access to the CEO. I didn't realize that people would pay you that kind of money. My entry level was at $1 million in my heyday, or I wouldn't take the account. And I became proficient at my work. You're too kind with your description of my work. I don't know that I am one of the best speakers, but I definitely am one of those people who's most committed to provide the best service I can. On the platform, the platform comes easily to me like it does to you, Peter. But over the years, definitely I have honed my skill. I speak on this campus now probably 70, 80 times a year. Lots of times it's open houses for families or checking out our school. So it's a major presentation to make sure they like who we are and buy into what we do. And I'm grateful to the heavens because I've been quite successful at it. But forgive me if I boast. I've been successful at everything I've been in.
Good.
Not because I'm smart, but because I understood the fundamentals. What I taught for years. I understood the fundamentals. That's what I teach on my seminars and speeches. And when people follow the fundamentals, they do well. I'm on the board, as you know, of a lot of major corporations. And in one corporation, which is the 6th largest financial institution in the US, about $500 billion in assets, about 60,000 employees. I'm the longest serving director, 30 years. What I understand and acknowledge is, as we began to buy lots of smaller companies, I learned a lot about fundamentals. What is it that makes an organization succeed? And of equal importance, what does it take for an organization to fail? You can take the word organization out, put company, take company out, put person. And how do you develop productive successes and productive failures? A lot of times we succeed in life, but we don't know why we succeeded. So if you don't know why you succeeded, you can't replicate it. And if you fail and you don't know why you failed, you can't correct it. So these are principles I learned. My mother used to say to me, if you want to be a great man, you must first walk hand in hand and side by side with great people. And I really took that to heart, Peter. I have dear friends like you, but like you, they're all successful. And success is not measured by money. I don't mean it that way at all. Money is only one part of a jigsaw puzzle for success. But holistically, success is about relational capital and reputational capital. And yes, financial capital. Look, you cannot give what you do not have. So I don't make any apologies about money. If you don't have money, you can't share it. You can't help other people who don't have it. And at Hyper University, I shouted from the mountaintop, we do not apologize for our success. There are way too many people in the United States of America who want to apologize for success, as if it's guilty if you're successful. No. Success is not coincidental. You do certain things in your life to get there. And if you frame that success with significance, if you have influence and impact and you use it for the good, look at all the things that you have done in your life, raising money for all these wonderful organizations, just as an example, helping so many organizations get the word out through your publications. That's impact and influence. And when you do that, you shouldn't apologize for any of it. You're teaching other people, you're modeling for other people how they can do it. I'm driven by that, Peter. I'm driven by the notion that I want to plant seeds of greatness in the minds, hearts, and souls of others. Wherever I have the opportunity, I want to do that. And at the end, I hope my life will be measured by how I've helped others, not by how many awards I have or how much money I have or what companies I own, but rather what have I done to make the world a better place, one person at a time. And if that sounds noble, I don't mean it that way. I'm a pragmatic person, but I do believe we have a responsibility to hold people by the hand and to march forward with them in substantive and substantial ways.
Who has had the most influence on your life and your career?
My mother used to say to me, who you spend time with is who you become. What you choose is what you get. How you change is how you succeed. By far, my 4th grade educated mom.
You don't talk about your dad very much.
No, my daddy died when I was 6.
Okay.
You know, Amazon did the story of my life, and so did the Biography Channel. And anybody watching this can go to Amazon, and I don't know, if $2 or $3, you can watch the story of my life. I've been at receiving end of some enormous awards, enormous recognitions. I'm grateful for every one, but none of that really matters at the end. What matters is, as I said, the impact you've left behind. So my dad, when these Amazon or Biography Channel do the story of my life, typically journalists would ask me this question. If you could have changed one thing in your life, what would it have been? I said, I know the answer to that question. That's an easy question. if I could have changed something in my life, I would have much rather have had a dad who have read me a book, sang me a song, thrown me a Frisbee, taken me to the ball game or to a circus, or just loved me and kissed me and told me he loved me. My dad was sick and bad, and I don't have any recollection of any interaction with my father. But you know, Peter, out of adversity emerges abundance. When you least expect it, something magical happens. It was my mom, influenced my life, sent me to America on a one-way ticket with $50. And, you know, the rest is history, my friend.
Now, I've heard that story. I've never heard the one-way ticket. She didn't want you coming back. She wanted you to build your future in the United States.
Yeah, I didn't see my mom for 5 years.
Wow.
In those days, we didn't have iPhones and FaceTime and all this stuff. You wrote an aerogram, took 7 days to get there, 7 days to get an answer back. And that's how I communicate with my mom. Look, my life has not been easy, Peter. I have had struggles in my life. I have people all the time saying to me, you know, you've succeeded, you have the tiger by the tail. And I go, well, how do you think I got here? I remember people who helped me in the early days. I mentioned one of my friends is a multi-billionaire. As you know, I have a lot of those friends because I'm in Horatio Alger. I know people you know in Canada who are in Horatio Alger, quite wealthy, quite successful. And yesterday I was talking to one of those guys and I said, he was telling me that he read Norman Vincent Peale's book and he gives it to his people. I said, well, Norman Vincent Peale was a friend of mine. I was 30 years old and he must have been 70 or something. And my first book came out in 1983. And I asked Dr. Peale if we'd write the foreword to the book. I was a kid. Dr. Peale wrote me back and he said, that's orders from headquarters. I'll be delighted to write the book. He wrote the foreword to my book, Peter.
Oh, wow.
I mean, unbelievable. He was at the height of his success. Now, look, we don't forget people like that. People who were there for us when we needed them the most and who influenced us in this measurable way. We don't forget people like that. And so my life had a lot of struggles, ups and downs, of course. It wasn't easy for me to do what I have done or what I wish to do. But guess what? It worked. You know, it just all worked. And now, Peter, I'm much older than you are. I could be your grandfather. I'm 70. I'm 72. And for good or bad, I erroneously think I'm 40. And so I act that way. And I still get up between 3 and 3:30 every morning. I study for 2 to 3 hours. I walk with a friend of mine who's the chairman of a mega company at 6 o'clock every day. And I come to work about 8 o'clock and I'm ready to rock and roll. Most of the time it's 12 hours or more. I love what I do. I tell our students, you are responsible for your own happiness. Figure it out. What would make you happy and do more of it? And for me, it's work. Unlike you, Peter, I have no talents. You know, I don't play golf. I don't play tennis. I drink some, a glass of good wine every night. That's the extent of my talent. But other than that, I love to work. And my work is my play. And yet my play has amazing influence on the lives of others. I'm in the education business. I am today president of a university with 5,600 students, 2,000 employees, and about 100,000 visitors to this campus every year. And I'm the chief executive officer. I don't need to tell you what that means. I have to inspire, involve, engage, get people invested in what we do, and keep peace in the house. And remarkably, I have kept peace in the house. We have no issues on this campus. I get along very well with everybody, faculty and others. And success helps. Of course, success helps. But we had the Great Recession, as you know, in 08, 09. We went through it with a breeze. We kept growing. We just had a major pandemic. Most schools shut down and all that. We did not. We managed it. We rented hotels. We put our students in them when we needed to. But today I've got about 20 COVID-19 positives on campus. They're in hotels for 14 days. We have built a big clinic for them. We have transportation and food service. I mean, we're doing it the right way. We're doing it in an extraordinary way, and it just pays off.
Joe Siegel knows I'm going to be talking to you sometime today, and he wanted to be remembered to you. He's doing well. He hasn't left his house in 8 months, and it's a nice house not to have to leave. But he wishes you well, and I do too. And I thank you so much. Even though we had a few technical issues at the beginning, thank you for your wisdom, your understanding, your patience, and your enthusiasm for life and the gusto in everything you do. And I'm glad.
Peter, number one, tell Mr. Siegel that what a memorable night that was at his house, thanks to you who made all that possible. And that night, Dr. Peter Legge, you honored me in a big way because of all these fabulous speakers who were there. You came to me and said, would you please speak on behalf of the group? I've never forgotten that, Peter. I took that as a major responsibility and assignment. I hope I did you proud. And then, Peter, I would want everybody watching this podcast to know, I hope Canada appreciates Peter Legge like the rest of the world appreciates Peter Legge. Peter, you've spoken on my campus, you've spoken in my city, you've spoken at National Speakers Association. I was honored to present you with the highest honor as you became inducted in our Hall of Fame. I was so proud when your university there bestowed upon you a doctorate. I am your biggest fan, Peter Legge, and I want everybody watching this to know that. I have watched you and known you for many, many years, and you are the specimen of greatness in my book. I have all your books right here in my library because you were smart enough to sign everyone for me, and you've signed one for each of my vice presidents and my deans, and they all have your book and learning from your wisdom. So you've invited me to be with you today. I thank you for that. God bless you, Peter Legge, and all the good that you do in the world. I hope that our paths will cross again soon in person when this pandemic allows us to do so. You're looking fabulous, and say hello to everybody in your family. And I hope to see you again very, very soon.
You will. Thank you, Nido. Love you lots.
Thank you. Love you too. Bye-bye.
If you have lived in Canada for a period of time, you would have heard of the Man in Motion World Tour. It was 26 months, 34 countries, 40,000 kilometers, a wheelchair trip around the world. It was an achievement beyond words. It was an achievement that is most remarkable, no less so than my special guest today, whose name and achievements are synonymous with making us all aware of this amazing feat of liberating the potential of people with disabilities. His recognition and awards are what leaders are about. His world journey started March 21st, 1985. It went on until May 22nd, 1987, over 2 years. Canada has recognized him with the Order of Canada, the Order of British Columbia. He has 36 honorary degrees, and just about every other honor Canada can bestow. I am so honored to welcome my friend and Canada's own Rick Hansen.
Hey, Peter. It's great to join you. Thanks for having me.
Good to have you here, my friend. I'd like to go back basically to that day where the truck ran off the road. How long after that did you come up with the Man in Motion idea?
You know, Peter, when I was 15 years of age and that accident happened coming back from a fishing trip, I thought my life was over. And I had to struggle just to hang on to hope. It was the most critical element of being able to really survive that incredible ordeal. And laying in the hospital bed and then in the rehabilitation center One of the dreams that I had was trying to imagine what my life would be like now, not being able to use my legs. I started to push the wheelchair, and I'm thinking, I used to have this dream of going around the world on an adventure with my buddies, once I graduated from high school or university, and taking our bicycles. And I was thinking, yeah, maybe I could do that in a wheelchair, just maybe. I'm still having trouble just getting across the street. So we'll park that for a while. But it wasn't really until my great friend, Terry Fox, he came out, I recruited him to our wheelchair basketball team, and Terry attempted to run across the country for cancer research. And indirectly, what he demonstrated was that this is the potential of people with disabilities. And my journey to overcome my internal demons related to disability meant that I had to accept myself as being whole, see ability, overcome my attitudes and stereotypes. And I also had to overcome these social and physical barriers that I was inheriting everywhere. And I thought, yeah, maybe I can do something to pay it forward as well. Maybe I could wheel around the world and show the potential of people with disabilities if internal and external barriers were removed. And that became the genesis of my Man in Motion World Tour, to take a physical dream and combine it with purpose, and do it at a time when I was at the peak of my athletic career as a wheelchair marathoner, and it was my chance to give back.
Did you ever have any trepidation that it might not catch on with Canada to begin with?
Oh, Peter, the greatest success of that whole tour was being able to overcome all of the self-doubt, the skepticism, the inability to get it all perfect and just start. So many things could have gone wrong. Everything was a struggle. It was one stroke at a time, 17 million strokes later. And even after all the successes in China, where, millions of people were engaged, coming back up the East Coast of the United States, we didn't seem to have the impact, and I was going to quit because I really didn't think the Canadians would respond, and that would be the end of it. But my wife, Amanda, who was a physiotherapist at the time, talked me back off the limb, and basically she challenged me to have faith that Providence would kick in and that Canadians would respond. And thanks to her, I had the courage to keep trying and keep believing, and Canadians did respond. But boy, there were some times. It was a grind.
Some dark nights.
But again, each of us has that internal resiliency, the ability to believe in your dream and just keep bringing it. But we all have our limits, and that's when a team member, a champion, a supporter, or somebody from an unknown source, like a divine wind, comes in to create that little extra push and inspiration to keep you going. And fortunately, all three of those happened to keep me going, and otherwise the tour would have never happened, for sure.
What did keep you going those 2 years? What specifically kept you going?
When you start on a journey to make a difference, to inspire people to think differently about people with disabilities, to see ability, and to see tangible action, thoughts, or reflections, if you see that, you know that all the pain, all the challenge, all the suffering is worth it. And there were lots of stories, but the one most powerful one for me was wheeling into a small town in Poland, and there was a crowd gathered, and this young man came up sitting on a pillow on a piece of plywood with 4 little skateboard wheels, pushing on his hands. And he was streaming tears as he got beside me, and through an interpreter, he said, "Mr. Hansen, thank you, thank you." And I said, "Why?" And he said, "Because thanks to you, this is the first time that my family and my community are looking at me with ability. And I feel so proud." And, when you see that, you go, yeah, okay, that's worth it. That's the dream in action.
So how many of those kinds of experiences obviously have influenced you and inspired you to keep going.
Thousands of them, in small or big ways. And it's the only way, because the difference between a dream and a reality is often so big that you can just collapse under the enormity of the disappointment. But for me, being vigilant to look and to see the little things, the moments where you're, like in a shopping mall, I think it was a Safeway in Texas, where we were able to give, thanks to our sponsors, a brand new wheelchair to a gentleman whose chair was literally held together by duct tape and wire. And he was just like completely moved beyond words. And you come across Canada in the middle of winter, and there's a young man who's been sitting there in the cold, -30, and you wheel by him, and his whole face shifts to an illumination of hope. And you can kind of get that sense that for him, it was like, if he can do that, I can do anything.
Yeah.
And he was redefining his future in that moment. Or you see a community come together and raise money for a ramp, or, for some accessible play park, or you see a young man who's just lost his leg to cancer, who's wondering about his possibilities, and he's there on crutches as you go forward, and he feels a sense of pride in the fact that he happens to have a disability. And you go, wow, that's an incredible shift in attitude and perspective. And so those are the things you look for. And yeah, there's the big moments, the flashy bands and the big crowds, but when you see tangible impact on real people who truly can see a life for themselves, to see that they're whole as a human being, that was where the power came from, for sure.
So a number of situations, different ones, other than your beautiful wife, who has influenced you the most, or who has inspired you the most to keep pursuing your dreams?
When I was injured, Peter, there was pre-information age where no computers, and everything came from personal engagement or word of mouth. And I had this huge black canvas of despair. Like, I had no idea what it would be like to live a life with a disability. I thought my life was really over. I needed to be fortunate enough to encounter people who could show me that that wasn't true, to build a sense of texture and color in the borders of hope and possibility of my new canvas of my life that was unfolding in front of me. And fortunately, this amazing guy named Stan Strong wheeled into my life as a peer counselor for the BC Paraplegic Association. And he was also a team manager of a wheelchair basketball team called the Vancouver Cable Cars. And he wheeled into my life, and he had a spinal injury. I would complain about being, in a hospital for 4 months, and he chuckled and said I was injured in the 30s, and I was there for 4 years. I wasn't supposed to survive. He didn't have any rehab center. There were no ramps. There was nothing. And yet he carved a life for himself, and he reached back and he helped others like me to say it's possible. And what he did is he did something super special, is that he decided that he could focus not on his disability, but on possibilities. And he actually saw joy in life inside that pain and suffering. And he ended up finding purpose by helping others like him to see those possibilities, to remove those barriers. And all I saw in him was this light, a beautiful grin, a smile, always enthusiastic, always encouraging. And he had way more challenges than I had, but it didn't matter, because he was just living his life. And I thought, if he can do it, so can I. And being associated with him really instilled me with that sense that, yeah, it's attitude, it's perspective, it's mindfulness. And I started practicing that and things started to shift. Not overnight, but it was the key ingredient to help me leave behind one, the anger and the resentment to the driver, to forgive him, to forgive myself for getting in the back of the car, to forgive my body for not healing, to then start to stop looking at the fact I couldn't use my legs and start looking at my heart, my arms, my mind, my life, my friends, people I loved, and then started to get on with life again. And Stand Strong was my angel.
Over the years, we've been at receptions. I've been in the audience when you've been speaking. I think I might have even spoken at an event that you were speaking at, and I've never seen you negative at all. In fact, I would have to say, if I didn't look, I'd have no idea you were in a wheelchair. So how do you achieve this incredible positive attitude about your life and what you're doing and your purpose?
It's continue to work at it, Peter. It's never perfect. You know, it's like a duck on the water. You see on the surface, you know, this calm looking duck and the legs are going like that. And there's definitely lots of rough days and yeah, definitely challenges, but you work at it. And when you've been through the cycles, you have a sense of almost optimism and comfort to know that this too shall pass. Why? Because you have the ability to process. And I think that continual engagement it really makes you feel that, yeah, anything can happen. And yeah, it's going to be terrible sometimes. You know, like the most brutal thing in my entire life was losing my first grandson, like 24 hours before his due date, with an undetected knot in the umbilical cord. And I couldn't imagine anything more horrific to happen than experience that for my daughter, my son-in-law, our family. And it was one of those things where you just, you never wish that on anybody, but you know you're going to have to struggle, you're going to have to grieve, you're going to feel the pain and the loss, but you can see the love and you can see the beauty in the grieving, to know that it's the longing for that 40 beautiful weeks that we spent together, and you'll never leave us. And then having the courage to move forward and to keep living and to make that precious life count, and to risk again, and to just realize that this is the one chance. This is what we have, and everybody has their burden, their obstacles. They're visible or not so visible. They're sometimes devastating, but in many ways it's normal. And how we deal with it.
Losing that child has caused you to become partly the person you are.
Every loss,
you struggle.
Every loss, Peter. Yeah, every loss.
You must think about it every day.
He'll never leave us, and yet the memories are of deep love. The 40 weeks we had, the memories are also of the fact that we move forward with our life, and he's part of us. And yeah, and there's those moments where the pain comes back. You feel, you relive those moments, but you have a choice. You know, you can process that and you can keep moving, or you can hold it. And trauma is either a released process or it's stored. And the degree to which you experience your challenges and how you work through them gives you the ability to be free. And it doesn't mean you ignore them, that you're oblivious, but you have the ability to keep moving forward and keep your heart open, keep living life, And it's an optimism and a process that you have to keep working at, because there's no one lump payment on one adversity on your life journey. Life goes like this for all of us, and we never know where the next curveball is going to come from. But if we've done it once,
we can do it again.
And we can also see meaning in what we're doing and make it count. And that's a choice.
You've heard the expression, your habits determine your future. So what are some of your very best habits that will determine the future of the Rick Hansen and the Rick Hansen Foundation and what you're accomplishing in the world?
I think first of all is to never stop, to never ever give up, to be relentless and determined, to be passionate about a goal or a dream with having purpose inside of you, because that's where your strength comes from. And ultimately it's the never-ending journey. The fact that the goal and the dream that I have, which is to try to do my part to help achieve a cure for paralysis one day, so the next generation won't have to endure that kind of pain and suffering that so many millions of people have gone through, or to make the world accessible and inclusive for people with disabilities so they don't feel they need to be cured in order to be whole as human beings. That's a long journey, two big dreams that'll never really happen in my lifetime. And yet I know that if I'm relentless in the pursuit of the next step and the next step, that's where my energy comes from. I love envisioning where gaps are, where barriers exist, and what solutions can take place, and then bringing teams of people together, and then finding a solution, and then assembling another team to be able to actually make that happen. And hopefully the results of that keep moving the bar a little further each time, each cycle.
You've probably heard of a speaker who's unfortunately passed away named Jim Rohn.
Yeah.
And I read a lot of books, and I read most of his books. And the other night I came across, I won't say it's a poem, I came across something, and it said to me, this is for Rick, this is for you. Let others lead small lives, but not you. Let others argue over small things, but not you. Let others cry over small hurts, but not you. Let others leave the future up to someone else, but not you. You are creating the future for thousands of people worldwide who have disabilities, and you're a beautiful Canadian, and I love you, my friend.
Thanks, Peter. I really appreciate it, and much gratitude from me. I just feel like I'm one of the luckiest guys on the planet, and I wouldn't trade my life for the use of my legs to be on this mission. It's a privilege, and I thank you for being part of that and taking this time to be with me today.
My pleasure. And if you think
You're
Canada-wide can do anything to help you or anything you're doing, please call or have Heather call.
Will do. Thanks, Peter. Great to see you.
Okay.
Stay healthy.
Yeah, you too.
Okay. Take care.